Personal finance practice problem using Excel. Pay period comparisons. Prepare to get financially fit by practicing personal finance. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. If you have access to the Excel worksheet and would like to follow along, note that we're down here in the practice tab as opposed to the example tab. The example tab, in essence, being an answer key. Information's on the left-hand side. We're going to populate that into the blue area on the right-hand side. We're looking at our pay periods, which we could have at weekly, semi-monthly, and bi-weekly, converting them to monthly and or yearly, so that when we do comparisons, say on a yearly basis, we might have that information. We can figure out how we can take our pay period and then convert it to a yearly, or the same for a monthly. This might be useful when you do comparisons or when you do ratio type of analysis. They might want the information on a yearly basis. They might want the information on a monthly basis. Particularly, the monthly basis will be common when you're doing kind of budgeting standpoints and projections in that format. So if we let's start off with the weekly here. Now, you would think this would be fairly straightforward, but it can be a little bit confusing to do because the year's not quite even. We got a leap year involved here, 365 days in the year. We've got some months that have 30 days, then other months have 28, and then we got the leap year month and so on and so forth. And so, it's not completely even. So what we want to do is basically give a good estimate in terms of, and we can do this in a couple different ways, how we can break this out. So if we had a weekly pay, how could we get that then to a monthly amount? Let's say we're doing budgeting type of information. Now you might say, well, there's about 4 weeks in a month, but that's really not exact. That's not very exact. It's more like 4.3, and even that's not exact, really. So typically what you really want to do is you want to be annualizing it, and then break it down to monthly. So annualize it and then divide it by whatever period, which would be in this case the months. That will work and be possibly more accurate no matter what pay period that you're kind of using here. So if we're on a weekly basis, then we might do something like this. We might say, all right, if I want the monthly amount, I'm going to take the weekly amount that we're going to get paid, the 1,154, and then we're going to pick up the weeks in a year. So I'm going to say weeks in a year. Now, this is something that you basically just kind of want to know how many weeks are in a year. And I'm going to use 52 as the number of weeks in a year. And even that's a bit of an approximation. You might calculate that. You might think about that by taking the days in a year divided by how many days are in a week, which are 7. So you could say, well, there's 365 about days in a year generally, divided by 7, and you get about 52. And even that, it's not exactly 52, but I'm going to use 52 here in our approximation. So we're going to say weeks in a year, about 52, font group underline, and that's going to give us our annual. So that will be equal to the 1154 times the 52. That will give us our 60,000, and then we're going to have the months in a year, which are 12, breaking it back down to the monthly amount. So we'll bring it up to the yearly amount and then break it back down to the monthly amount. Monthly amount would then be equal to the 60,000 divided by 12, and that would be the 5,000 a month. So you can think about it this way too. This might be the first way that it comes into your mind, most likely, if you haven't done this constantly. So you'd say weekly would then be the 11454, and you say, well, how many weeks are in a year? And you're going to say around 4 would be most people's first guess, right? And it's really more like 4.3. But let's do the little calculation here for estimated weeks in a month. Estimated weeks in a month. So we know that there's weeks in a year. Let's think about it this way: of about 52, right? About 52 weeks in a year. So if we know that, which is about 365 divided by 7 days, and then we could say, okay, then months in a year then is going to be equal to, I'll just say 12 months in a year. Underline that font group and underline, and that'll give us the estimated weeks in a month, which we're going to say, well, if there's 52 weeks and then divided by the months in a year, we would get about 4 months. And we're going to add some decimals now, number group, adding a few decimals. So it's really 4.3333, right, on forever, 4 1/3, basically. But so that means that then if I get my monthly then is going to be equal to, if there's 4 weekly 1154 times 4.33, you get that 5,000. Again, most people would, if you just use 4, then you're going to get something like that, which is, not even very close. You want to get closer than that. Most people might say, well, 4.3 about 4 1/3, and then they might say 4.33 a little bit closer, and it's really 4.33 on forever, and is a closer estimate. So and there you go. So that's the other way you can figure that one. So I'm gonna alignment, indent, and indent. But the general rule, if you break it out to a yearly amount and then back down to whatever period you're looking at, monthly in this case, that's probably a standard rule that'll work more easily no matter what your pay period is. So let's do the same for like semi-monthly. Now these two are kind of confusing, semi-monthly and bi-weekly, and they're some of the most common pay periods that people have. And semi-monthly means twice a month. So that means you're going to be paid on like the 15th and the 30th or the 31st or the 28th or whatever the month is, right? So there's uneven months, but you're still going to get paid twice a month. And then bi-weekly means you're going to get paid every other week, which in some ways is more standardized because you're going to get paid every other week, no matter if there's 30 days or 31 days or so on. The problem is you would think this would come out to the same number of pay periods in a year, but they don't, because it's uneven. There's an unevenness here. So let's take a look at these two. Let's do the semi-monthly first. So I'll do the same strategy to first calculate it up to a yearly amount, which could be useful in and of itself, and then break it back down to a monthly amount. So if we had the semi-monthly, we're going to say this is going to be equal to the 2,500. And then we have the periods in a year. So how many periods that are semi-monthly, half months, are in a year? Well, we could say, well, that would be months in a year are 12, and we've got 2 periods each month, so twice a month, which times 2 would be the number of periods in a year, which would be equal to, in the outer column, the 12 times 2, or 24 months in a year. Let's indent that, making it look a little nicer. Alignment, indent, picking this one up, alignment, indent again. Let's put an underline here, font group and underline. Let's put an underline here, font group and underline. So that means that we would have the yearly amount if we got 2,500 times 24 periods, 2,500 times 24 of those semi-monthly periods. That would be that 60,000. Again, I made them all 60,000 here. So, and then we're going to say the months. So then we can break it down. So that's our yearly amount, and we want monthly amount. So the months in a year are going to be 12. Put an underline there, font group and underline, and that'll give us the monthly amount. So the monthly amount, which will be equal to the 60,000 divided by 12, or about the 5,000. So that one, of course, you can probably see that one a little bit more straightforward, just to break it out straight to the monthly amount. Because if we artificially made it so that there's 2 periods every month, then we've kind of forced that standardization there. So we'll say semi-monthly is going to be the 2,500. And if that's semi-monthly and we've forced it, no matter whether it has 31 days or 28 days, to have 2 periods per month, then we know that the period per month are going to be 2, because we forced it to be that way. And that means that the monthly, we can get right to the monthly amount, which would be equal to the 2,500 times 2. So we can get there directly a little bit more easily with that one, given kind of the artificial nature of the way we forced it to work, even though we have uneven month periods that we're dealing with. All right, let's look at the bi-weekly one. Now this one we get paid every 2 weeks, so that means it's not going to land on the 15th or the 31st or something even, because the months are going to be different in length, and so that means that the 2 weeks will land randomly, in the middle of the months as we go forward. So we're going to then have the bi-weekly amount. The bi-weekly is going to be equal to the 2308. And then we're going to try to figure out the periods in a year. And I'll do this by first thinking about the weekly periods in a year. Instead of thinking about 12 months times 2, which you might think of as the same thing up top, it's not times 2, because we're not talking twice a month here. We're talking every 2 weeks. So we can't use the months because the months are uneven. So what we have to do is use the weeks because they're a little bit closer. I'm going to use the estimated weeks of 52 weeks. So we're going to say weeks in a year, and I'm going to use about 52, which is close to 365 divided by 7 days, 365 days, 65 days divided 365 days divided by 7 days. That would be approximately 52. I'm just going to use the 52 as what is commonly used as that approximation. Then I'm going to divide by 2. Divide by 2, underline, font group, and underline. So if there's 52 weeks in a year and we get paid every 2 weeks, then we have the periods in a year, which are going to be equal to the 52 divided by 2. And you'll note we get 26 instead of what we got with the semi-monthly, which was 24. So when you're thinking semi-monthly, you're thinking 12 months times 2 because we forced 2 periods per month. When you're thinking bi-weekly, I think of it as how many weeks, 52 weeks divided by 2, and you get to 26. So you have more pay periods resulting in differences in the periodic pay, even though this is still going to come out to the total yearly salary, I believe, of the $60,000, if I did it right. So we're then going to go to the alignment indent. Let's indent this one again. Let's underline here, font group, and underline. And so the yearly amount, so then yearly is going to be equal to the 2308 times 26, or 60,000. And now that we have the yearly amount, we can once again break it down to the monthly amount by taking the months in a year, which are 12. Going to underline that, font group underline, and then that will be the monthly amount equal to the 60,000 divided by 12, or the 5,000 again. So we made them all to be that. So now we can do that one more time. You might think about it this way. You might say, all right, well, what if the biweekly amount is going to be equal to the 2,308, and I want to find out how many periods are in a month. Again, this is probably the first kind of thought process you would think about if you're saying bi-weekly every 2 weeks, and I'm trying to get it up to a monthly amount. So how many bi-weekly periods would be in a month? That's probably a little bit more difficult to think about than doing the yearly analysis. If you do the yearly and then back it into a month, that usually works again with all of these fairly easily. So that would be the routine I would kind of use. But if we were trying to figure it out this way, we'd say, all right, well, the periods in a month are going to be, let's take the weeks in a year. That's 52. I'm just going to say 52, 365 divided by 7, about 365 days divided by about 7 days is about 52. And then I'm going to take that and divide by 2, just like we did before. Underline that. Let's put an underline while we're doing it here. And that's going to be the periods in a year, which is going to be equal to 52 divided by 2. So there's our same 26. 26 there. And then we're going to say, well, if there's 26 periods in a year, let's take the months in a year, which are 12, and figure out the periods in a month. So that'll give us the periods in a month. And I'll put this in the outer column, which will be equal to the 26 periods in a year divided by the 12 periods in a month. And we get this funny number. I'm going to go to the number group. And this is why this is probably not the best way to do it. It's better to annual. You don't have to deal with this funny number. But in Excel can deal with it fine. Number group, and then we're going to, underline it here. Let's underline this one. And then that's going to give us our monthly amount. Monthly amount, which will be equal to the 2308 times that thing we just did right there. And there we have it. Let's do some indentations. And alignment indent and indent. So this last one's probably the least common one to use. But the general rule is that it's nice to take this information, make it a yearly amount, and then back it into whatever period that you want to back it back into, whether that most commonly would be a monthly type of period. To do that, then you got to remember, particularly between the semi-monthly and bi-weekly, what those two things mean. And you have to have an idea of how many days are in a year, 365 generally, and how many weeks are in a year is helpful. 52, or you could figure that out by taking the 365 divided by 7. And then if you put your mind frame on, I'm going to figure this out monthly, no matter what they ask me, whatever pay period they give me. I'm going to figure this out yearly, no matter what they ask me, and then back in to whatever. In other words, if they give me a weekly amount and tell me to find the monthly amount, it seems faster to jump right to the monthly amount. And you can, if you know it's 4.4 and a third period, weeks in a month, but you don't want it. It would be easier in general to say the mind frame is going to be, I'm first going to annualize, then back it in to the monthly period. That usually is actually an easier process.